Hey guys, today we're going to work on the next level of the tower. I won't try to do the entire tower as a tutorial, but I will, if I have some ideas I think that you guys will want to see, I will try to do a tutorial on them, maybe new techniques and things like that. But for now, we can go ahead and get started on this tutorial. I want you to realize that I am running this in about 4x speed, so no, I don't click this fast. In case you guys were wondering, some people were mentioning that. Um, what I'm doing here is you're looking at a transparent view. I'm on layer 2, level 2 here, looking down at level 1, and I'm using that as a guide to place some initial walls here. And I'm just looking from the top down to see how things are lining up. It all depends on how I really ended up lining my splines and grids on the lower level. And when you have things like doorways interrupting your spline or setting off a little bit, you'll find that you won't have perfect circles in all cases. But I can always go back and clean it up. I'm using the same hex codes that I used yesterday. Because again, at some point I may want to darken this tower or, use different types of motifs. I'm going to show you guys some examples of what you can do with color changes here in this tutorial today, which is usually premature for me to do that, but I thought that you'd like to see what it looks like. So now for this level, I'm wanting to do some more creative things with the floor. I don't want just a big flat area in the middle. So we're going to work on breaking up flat areas of floor. And I'll go back to the first level and do this once I choose some of my my motifs. But here I'm going to separate the inside floor from the outside. I'm playing around with putting walls down because there's some things that I want to do with lighting and indirect lighting coming out from under the floor. That is sort of a trick that you can do with walls. And so right now I'm just trying to match a wall with the floor because I'm thinking right now that that may be how I end up doing this. I had to put this floor on level 700 in order to be above that wall. So, which puts you in a precarious position. If you want to put more things on top of it, you're stuck with one level, well now 2 levels, that since there's a above roof line. But I'm just experimenting around with how to set all of this up. And now I'm putting a floor at level 100. It's underneath that floor that you saw me put in the middle. And this one is just, some of a dirty, messy floor. And I'm giving it a particular hex code. I'm giving it the same hex code that I gave some other things here. And I'm doing the same thing with lighting. So this lighting and the floor, and you'll see some other elements, I've got all on the same hex code. And you can see here, I'm already starting to light underneath the floor. But I realize that I don't like that light, the way it reflects off of the wall, so I just made the wall transparent. And now when I put the lighting down, you can see, except for that artifact there, that the light does not encroach on the floor. So it really does give you that indirect underlit effect. And that's what I'm going for. And I'll explain why I even put the lighting in certain hex codes here in a second. Now what I want to do is get that wibbly-wobbly line that we talked about in the last tutorial. And I'm going to use that to finish the edge of this floor, just so that the floor doesn't look quite so unfinished, or it's just that hard edge. And there, that wibbly-wobbly line again, it's got slight imperfections in it, just to make it look a little bit more natural to the eye. That's a Strixon Forgotten Adventures innovation that I love. Now what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the cloud tool that you guys have seen me use before, and I'm giving it a couple of, first of all, I'm alternating between two colors. One color is that hex code that I've been putting everything else under, the lights and some other things. It's a hex code that I'm going to change later. And the other one is just an alternate of white, and they're both semi-transparent. And I've got them also laying down at layer 100. So they're laying down underneath the floor layer in the middle, but above the layer on the edge. And right now, everything's white, which can be a cool effect. And now I'm back to the first level. And I'm grabbing that same hex code and I'm just putting some rugs down. I just decided, for the sake of this, I'm going to put some rugs down. I'm going to make them small enough that they, who knows, maybe there's some kind of, arcane, device of some kind, but I'm really using them for lighting. All of these lights have that same unique hex code. And I'm just lighting around, above and around those, because there's walls there and they can make the light look funny if you don't put a light on either side of them. So now what I'm going to do is save this. And what I just did was I just edited, I did this, I paused the recording and I went back to the source code and I edited all of those instances. I just did a find and replace of all those instances of that hex code for a red version of the hex code. And you can see what happened is it creates this super cool red ambient effect on this level. And you'll notice that floor is also that same hex code. So that floor changed colors. And if you'll notice those lights down below, the red lighting also changed colors. I don't think I got the hex code right on those lights. That's why they didn't change. But this is how you can change the motif of an entire map, even across multiple layers. And this is what I'll do when I make this map like a necromancer tower versus something else. And again, I may end up building 20 different levels, all customized, but I'll only use some of them in a particular storyline that I'm doing. What I did was I took the transparent stairs, because it lets you put any sort of form underneath them, any kind of floor. And so it's a way of making custom looking chairs, or stairs, sorry. And then I realized that I don't have to have my floor above level 700 anymore. So that floor is now, it should be at about level 200. Surrounded it by a wall. I took off the shadows. And now I'm just going to surround this center staircase with shadows in whatever way I think the light would collect around it or gather underneath it. I'm using the same spline technique to make sure that these shadow paths are drawn correctly. And then even though there's light in here, I'm still going to draw shadow paths around this area, because I do want that separation to exist. And you can see that it does help with that separation. And then I'm going back and I'm just cleaning up any little artifacts from spline differences. So now I'm feeling pretty good about the space. Doing some more shadows. I really like that effect. Now, if you end up putting a map like this into something like Foundry, and using some of their awesome new lighting, it's going to be really, really cool. Now what I'm doing is I'm breaking up these large spaces. So I just grabbed the I think it's the metal thing, but it matches uh, it matches the grout around these things. So all I'm really doing is I'm just breaking up this big monotonous space by creating the illusion that there's some missing stones in it. You can use the same thing to mess up a certain area, but it's just a really quick hack. The eye doesn't see it. I think I darken these just ever so slightly to try to match that grout even better. But you can see that I'm just sort of trying to randomly delete some stones. And it gives you the effect of breaking up the space and making it a little bit more interesting. It's really easy with these tile textures to just fill spaces and walk away from them, but those don't really exist in the world. So this is just an easy way to fix it up. What I'm doing now is I'm experimenting with whether I want these clouds to come up above the floor. And so I'm using some of the colors that I used before just as an experiment to see if I like it. I had to go back and grab that hex code from this. I do keep a notepad open with my hex codes that I've been using in case I forget one, or if you close the map and open it back up again, you want to know what your hex codes are. You can always click into an old floor like I just did and grab it. But I tend to like to keep a library of these things. So if you're a Patreon subscriber of mine and you want to get these original Dungeondraft files, I also try to, if I've used custom hex codes, I try to include the list of codes that are used inside of the file so that you can grab these and make your own. Now here's another technique that I use. I'm creating curbs or some three-dimensionality, again, just to break up the space. It's too much space right here, and so I want to try to make it look like there's a little bit more just masonry work. And I'm experimenting with how I want my curbs to look. I'm currently doing shadows back to back, but I don't really like how that ended up. It just looks like a big fuzzy line. So I'm going to back out of that. And I'm just evaluating the space. And I realized that I don't really want a wall here. I want this to be floor that sort of descends down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the same floor I had before, but this time I'm going to put it at level 700. And I'm just going to draw a very small shape over that wall just to cover the wall up. So while the rest of the floor is level 200, I'm making it look like it's covering that wall. And that gives me a nicer finished floor here. And then I realized that, I don't want my staircase to go right up against this arcane pool of whatever that is. And so I'm just going to force the floor and the masonry to the shape that I want it. And then I'm going to continue that curb effect here. I've got snap to grid off, and I'm just trying to get the finish off that end piece there. Now this room is going to get filled with maybe other things, potentially. Maybe there's just going to be an encounter in here. But I won't worry about dressing it up today. That tends to be the easier thing. And I've done videos in the past that just show you how to dress things up. Here, you want to make sure that you are putting the staircase in the right shadows, especially when it's going down. So I'm just working on paths that would lead it down. If you ever wonder what your shadow should look like, you can always refer back to some of the Forgotten Adventures assets. They have some stairs that have shading going down, especially in the castle set. It can give you some clues as far as how your shading should look. But now that staircase definitely looks like it's going down. And now I'm going to grab a blue color just to show you again what happens. I'm going to save the file and edit the code, and now I've got a blue motif. So if I wanted this to be green and sickly or something else, pink and vibrant, it's really easy to make these changes as long as you're using those custom hex codes. You'll notice when I changed the file, for some reason, that staircase disappeared. And you'll find things like that will happen sometimes. You might have to redraw a particular asset. And then I just want to really kind of finish this off. You'll notice you can draw multiple paths over stairs, and you can keep layering on top until you start to get lower and lower. It's just a way of helping put those stairs into the right shading. And of course, that bottom part of the stairs up higher, so there's going to be some shadow there. This is starting to look pretty good. And this is just one level. With towers, you can get super creative, and you can create 100 levels of different motifs, and you can use whatever levels you want to use as long as your staircases agree. That's going to be one limitation, and it's going to be a design decision I have to make to figure out how I want to do my staircases going forward so that I can have the most flexibility with my levels. Now I'm at level 3, and we're going to do one more level today. I'm looking through to level 2 just so I can use that as my guidepost. And I decided for this level that I want to put some rooms in here. If I have a party coming through and I'm treating this like a dungeon crawl, or maybe there's a wizard living here and I want to create some bedrooms, I want a level with some rooms that can be explored. So I'm going to recreate some of the elements from the level below. And now I am drawing a floor, and this is going to look odd. But I want to fill it with the floor, but I don't want to fill that middle section. This is probably the hard way to do it, actually. So I'm going to draw my floor, and then I'm going to, but I'm not going to make it touch because it would confuse the floor tool. So now I'm just going to connect them up, and there, now I've got a complete floor. And now I just want to start blocking out the initial sort of entry point. Where would the party walk into from that staircase? And I'm looking at my grids around to make sure that I'm making this ample size to actually fit tokens. So a full token, filling a full square. You want to be careful about how you're designing your rooms, that you don't have a lot of half squares in there, because it makes it really cumbersome to move tokens around, and it means you can't even use that part of the room. I do like my thicker wall on the outside, so I'm replicating that here. I'm grabbing hex codes that I've used from down below. And you've seen this technique plenty of times now. As we get into other levels, I will introduce windows and balconies. And what's great about that is if you use those levels in other maps, then you can see down and you can see the balconies of levels below. You can use that for maybe tactical advantage or sneaking up to levels, things like that. But for now, we'll just stick with walls. And I'll show you different ways that I make windows when you have these kind of manufactured walls that I'm using. And now what I'm going to do is just start blocking out the rest of the rooms. I'm going to try to stay consistent with my hex codes here, because again, if I want to make this a dark room someday, This will be the easy way to do it. And hallways work well for intrigue. So I'm just trying to figure out, where I could place a hallway. This is going to be a really tight hallway. Obviously, I don't have a ton of space to work with, but I like hallways to then, open up into larger rooms that maybe the battles themselves might occur. And I'm thinking about how my players are going to move through this space. What doors will they check? Where am I trying to lead them to? And what do they have to go through to get there? Now, Forgotten Adventures at the moment has just wooden doors. I'm anticipating them coming out with some stone and metal doors and just a lot more door and window varieties in the future. But wood doors, I'm not crazy about them sitting on stone. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing, or I'm looking for a object that will help me cover those and also just sort of finish the wall. And I've found these pillars, and I like, in this case, just putting these over any joints where there's just some walls meeting. You can use this same technique when you're doing wooden walls. It's especially good for wooden walls because you'd expect them to have sort of joints between them. And now I'm going to start doing some work where, like, I don't think this is going to be usable area, so I'm going to use brick, and then I'm going to make that brick match the wall color. And it's going to leave me a little artifact there, that rounded piece. I can go cover that up later. But generally speaking, that just helps me sort of, anchor that staircase in there. And now I'm using one of Forgotten Adventures' kind of cool floor tools. I'm still at level 100. I'm just laying this right on top of the other floors. But what it does is it just makes an uneven brick. And I think that looks interesting. You can certainly overuse it, but you'll see me use this in maps to make them more interesting. And now what I'm doing in general is I'm just breaking up the floors. Here I'm using a wood floor. I'm going to put it at 90 degrees because I like them going horizontally for some reason. And then I'm going to give it its own custom hex code. And I'm going to grab that hex code and I'm going to put it into my little notepad library so I can remember that for later. And you notice I had to move the floor underneath out of the way, or I couldn't really interact with it. So then you turn on Snap to Grid and you can move your floors back. But now I've got the start of some rooms. They're blocked out. I'm just going to put those in there where they meet the walls just to complete it. When your players are moving through them, they don't really see a lot of those things because you've got presumably walls blocking off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying my shadows. Once I have the basic structure of any room, I start to put my shadows in, and it helps me visualize the spaces a little bit better. And this is just super easy. I'm at level 100. I'm using the medium shadow path tool. And I'm just going up and then back down again, both sides of the wall. And I'm going to break it up room by room in case I have to change these shadows later. And then you'll see where a shadow's about to end up on the floor, I turn on the transition to fade, and that just makes it so you don't have that hard line. And now I'm going to use I needed to fill that that floor in there. Otherwise, I would have seen through to the lower level, which may not have been bad. I would have seen the same floor color either way. So this is starting to feel pretty good for a level that will eventually be furnished with things. Now I do like to, here I'm gonna just use that same blue motif because maybe this is gonna be like an interesting room. Now I need to put some stairs going up, and I've decided that I'm gonna have the user sort of wind around and get finally into this room where the stairs go up. And what I'm looking for are some stairs. I'm gonna set it to 1, which is the artist's original idea of scale. And if I set it to 1, I grab the right stair, then it fills the square completely. I've just got those sitting at level 100. And now I just need to do the shadows around the stairs to make sure that they look like they're doing the right thing. I've decided I want it to be, I think, lighter going up. And there's some paths in Forgotten Adventures that let you put railings in. I'm going to do that and just give it a little embellishment. And there, now I've got some nice stairs. My whole party could potentially fit in that room. But that's feeling pretty good for a level with some rooms in it that I can get creative with here in the next version. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. That's all I've got for you today. I'll come back and try to think of some other concepts that might be helpful for you. But good luck with your map making, and thanks for stopping in.